members. It's the appointed time and we have a quorum. Good morning. On today's agenda, there are 3 papers to be discussed. Before the meeting, the administration submitted ECI 2023-24, 3 and 4 for member circulation. The papers set out the changes in directorate establishment approved since 2002 and the proposed changes to the directorate establishment in relation to the discussion items. I remind members that in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure, members should disclose the nature of any direct or indirect pecuniary interests relating to the items under discussion at the meeting before they speak on the items. I also draw members' attention to Rule 84 on voting in case of direct pecuniary interest. Item number 1, Highways Department proposed creation of 3 supernumerary posts of 1 principal government engineer D3 and 2 chief engineer D1, and redeployment of 1 permanent post of chief engineer D1 in the Highways Department with immediate effect upon approval of the Finance Committee up to 31st of March 2030 for establishing the Northern Metropolis Railways Office so as to assist in taking forward railway projects relevant to the Northern Metropolis. On 18th of April 2023, this was discussed by the panel on Transport Subcommittee on measures relating to railways on 18th of April 2023. For representatives in attendance, they include Mr. Reslin Lau, Undersecretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism. Mr. Liu Chen-san, Undersecretary for Transport and Logistics. Ms. Amy Wong, Deputy Secretary for Transport and Logistics 1. Ms. Fiona Lee, Principal Assistant Secretary for Transport and Logistics 3. Mr. Jimmy Chan, Director of Highways, and Mr. Ai Hon Waman, Principal Government Engineer, Railways Development Highways Department. Well, Mr. Chan Han-pen, the Chairman of the Subcommittee on Railways, is not a member of this subcommittee, so I will brief members on the points deliberated during the subcommittee. The subcommittee discussed on 18th of April 2023 the proposal. Most members in principle supported the need to establish a Northern Metropolis Railways Office and agreed that there is a need for new posts to be created. However, members have expressed concerns about the division of labor as well as the progress of setting up Railways Department. Members believe the Railways Department should be set up, and under that Railways Department, they should set up the NMRO. Also, setting up under the Northern Metropolis Coordination Office under the Development Bureau, offices for various areas. Members requested supplementary information on current duties of personnel and the division of labor for Northern Metropolis Railways Office and Railway Development Office. The information has been circulated. Right now, there are 3 members. First, it would be Mr. Sheng Hai-lung. Now, the planning principles of infrastructure-led and capacity creating. So that is the principles that has been undertaken for the Northern Metropolis, and I do support the proposal. So as the chair lady said, I do share the concerns as with the members of the Railway Subcommittee. During the last meeting of the Railway Subcommittee, actually, Principal Assistant Secretary Ms. Wong said that they are planning to set up a Railways Department. However, the Northern Metropolis is an urgent initiative, so that's why they're setting up this NMRO first. If members support for this Railways Department to be set up, NMR will be reassigned to the department. From Annex 2 of the paper, right now this Commissioner for Railways is a D3 post. It is the same rank as the Deputy Director of Highways. And if a Railways Department is to be set up, the Commissioner are they going to be head of a department, or are they going to stay the commissioner? If they are to be the head of the department, what is the rank of their position? Who is going to take over if that is not the case, the NMRO? Will the department or the bureau create new positions? Also for Hangyunwei, Shuttlecock, and Mankamto control points, they are not covered by the Northern Metropolis Development Strategy. And the Secretary said they wouldn't forget about these control points. However, the Northern Link said that these control points are not covered, but the Shenzhen control points are covered by railways. They're saying if we can complete the project in 7 years, can we connect to all these control points with railways then? Well, thank you for your support, Mr. Sheng. Well, the first question is about Railways Department and NMRO. So once the Railways Department is set up, what is going to happen to NMRO? Well, actually, the Deputy Secretary for NMRO is not necessarily the one to take over Railways Department. We'll consider the candidate in future. As for what the rank is going to be, if Railways Department is to be set up, we are thinking it's going to be someone of D5 rank. As for connections to other control points, I'll let the Director of Highways give supplementary information on that. However, right now for Hangyunwei Control Point and Sentin Technopole, the Development Bureau is currently compiling plans, and the Transport and Logistics Bureau and Highways Department will work on them with the plans. Whether it's railways or highway infrastructure, the plans will include such proposals. I'll see if Mr. Chen has anything to add. Director of Highways, please. Regarding the cross-boundary railway infrastructure, we are currently doing a few things on a high level. We are currently we have set up a task force on cross-boundary railway infrastructure with Shenzhen Municipal's People's Government. There are several projects ongoing. We're currently working with the Shenzhen government, a bridge that goes from Hengshui to Qianhai. This is an important infrastructure, and we are following up on the project. As for another project that we're doing with the Shenzhen government is the second stage study. We expect to complete the study in mid-2024 for us to make a plan on how to take forward railway infrastructure. The projects are also discussed by the task force, and they're being followed on. Next, Mr. Chao Shu-chung. Thank you, Chair. All along, I support the setting up of Railways Department so there's better overall planning for railway infrastructure in Hong Kong, and quality railway services can be provided to the members of the public. I'm quite concerned about the points being discussed today. the relationship between NMRO and Railways Department. Will the NMRO, the setting up of the NMRO, affect the progress of the setting up of Railways Department? Also, once this MMRO is set up, I believe they are only going to cover railway infrastructure in the Northern Metropolis. However, the railway infrastructure in other parts of Hong Kong, will they be ignored in their planning? Will there be poor coordination as a result? So I am quite concerned about the arrangements for the setting up of the Railways Department. Also, with this MNRO, the division labor with the existing Railway Development Office, is there going to be any overlap in their duties? I would like the administration to elaborate on that. Also, for the residents in Shenton Town Centre, it was said that in the paper that in 2031 there is going to be population intake. The planning goes all the way up to 2034. So how is the department or the bureau going to account for the transportation needs of the first population intake? Mr. Liu, please. Again, thank you, Mr. Chao Shu-chung, for your support in the setting up of the Railways Department. I'll let Director of Highways get into the details in future. However, I would like to explain the current situation for the setting up of the Railways Department. It is proposed to set up this Railways Department under Transport and Logistics Bureau. It is to promote the taking forward of railway projects and promote cross-boundary railway infrastructure, as well as enhancing monitoring and control measures. We still think there is a need to set up Railways Department. However, we have heard members' suggestions on the setting up of Railways Department. We would like to incorporate members' views and the plans and development of various railway projects. Afterwards, we'll set up the Railways Department. For the NMRO, it does not conflict with the setting up of the Railways Department. If both proposals are approved by the Legislative Council, the NMRO and Railways Development Office of the Highways Department will both be moved to the Railways Department to be set up. As for the Shenton population intake, well, they cannot match with the commissioning of Northern Link. Of course, we would like to expedite the project. If they indeed cannot be met, we will arrange for suitable public transportation so that residents can be conveyed to the nearest MTR station, and I'll let Director of Highways get into the division of labor. Well, once the NMRO is set up, the division of labor between it and the Railways Development Office, as the name suggests, the NMRO focuses on infrastructure in the Northern Metropolis. That would include Kutong Station, Hongshui Q Station, Northern Link Main Line, and Northern Link Spur Line. For cross-boundary railway infrastructure, that would include the Hong Kong Shenzhen Western Rail Link, Hongshui Q to Shanghai, and Northern Link Spur Line. We are currently working with the CEDD and Planning's Department on the development study of the new territories north. We'll look into the railway infrastructure in the area, and we're currently making plans together. As for ongoing projects or planned projects, they would include the ones under RDS 2014, such as Tongcheng Line Extension and Tuen Mun South Extension. They will be followed up on by the Railways Development Office. Also, with the strategic study beyond 2030, it was mentioned in the policy address last year that there are going to be 3 railways and 3 highways. The railway infrastructure mentioned will be taken forward by the Railways Development Office. They are both under the Highways Department. If the offices have to coordinate on certain projects, the commissioner and the deputy secretary can work together, and I can also help with the coordination. Thank you, Chair.
Next, Mr. Tong Li-Cai. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I thank the Transport and Logistics Bureau for answering my questions sent on the 10th of May. I also asked for information. Thank you for your response. Like other members, I am concerned about one of the proposed supernumerary position, that is the Commissioner for Northern Metropolis Railways, pitched at D3. The Railway Development Office head is also pitched at D3. In the annexes, it shows clearly that these are 2 positions: the Commissioner and the head of the Railway Development Office, or for short, the RDO. And they will report to the Director of Highways. On Annex 8, the RDO head has a very heavy workload, including the projects in the Northern Metropolis. There are 2 concerns. Why is it not a D2 post? So that this position will be under the purview of the head of the RDO if they have heavy workload. Do they have to report to the Director of Highways? And that is to pave way for the establishment of the Railway Development Office. Under the head of the Railway Development Office, there are several chief engineers at D1, and they are under the Commissioner for Northern Metropolis Railways. I have come to notice that the RDO1 is responsible for the railway projects of the Northern Metropolis. If the head of the RDO right now is not responsible for the projects of the Northern Metropolis, does it mean that this position has a relatively lighter workload? What projects will this position have to be responsible for? If these projects are under the chief engineer, what is the division of labor between this office and the NMRO if 2 persons are responsible for the very same projects? Will they sort of pass the buck when both of them actually share the same responsibilities? Under Secretary, on the second question about the redeployment of officers, I will invite the Director of Highways to take the question. On the first question, when we decide on the level of the Commissioner, we mainly take a look at the responsibilities and the portfolio of this position. The Commissioner is responsible for several cross-boundary projects, and he has to liaise with the Shenzhen counterparts, so this position has to be high level enough in order to foster interactions with Shenzhen counterparts. For the officer pitched at D2, if under the RDO, the reason why we need to create one more position of the Commissioner is that the workload is quite heavy, plus the projects are quite burning. Given the heavy workload, the head of the current RDO cannot be responsible for all those projects. The Commissioner is actually reporting to the Director of Highways, and the Director of Highways will also help with coordination. There will not be much contradiction as a result. For the next question, I will invite the Director of Highways, Mr. Jimmy Chen, please. After the establishment of the NMRO, will the RDO have much less workload, and what about the manpower division? In the Northern Metropolis, for the projects under the RDO, there are quite initial stage of studies. We have entered the stage of implementation, so with the current manpower, we cannot deal with the workload. After the establishment of the NMRO, it will be responsible for the railway projects in the Northern Metropolis. So apart from creating two chief engineers pitched at D1, for the chief engineer under the RDO, who is responsible for the projects of the Northern Link Main Line. That is a very important project indeed. That is why we think it should be under the NMRO so that the railway projects in the Northern Metropolis can be consolidated in order for them to be implemented. I have already walked you through the other projects. Under the RDO, there are 5 chief engineers. They have not stopped their responsibilities. They have been continuing with their work in order to plan the railway projects. Thank you, Madam Chair. Next, Mr. Lee Chun-kang. Thank you, Madam Chair. We need manpower to see projects being implemented, then we can generate revenue. For the NMRO, we are confident that we can do it better for the youth in the future. It is one of the hearts of the Northern Metropolis, so how can we attract more footfall as well as the throughput of cargo? That is very important. So the planning of railway projects is of the utmost importance. For the Shenzhen and Hong Kong-Shenzhen Western Rail Link and the Express Rail Link, there is more footfall. And there is a Hong Kong-Shenzhen Western Rail Link, HSWRL for short. Will you adopt a more forward-looking approach? Will you take a more macro approach? In Shenzhen Bay, you will put in place co-location arrangements. That is to say, you have to ask the people to get off the vehicle and then go to Tianhai. And I believe in the future, for the express rail link, technologies will be developing by leaps and bounds. In 2015, the express rail link has a coverage of 20,000 kilometers, and it will be up to the coverage will be double. Will you add an express rail link station to the HSWRL so that people do not need to go back to the West Kowloon for them to get on board the express rail link, or need to go back to the Shenzhen link to interchange? Can you come up with more convenient options so that Hong Kong citizens and the GBA residents will enjoy more convenience in the 1 hour commuting circle? Thank you, Mr. Lee, for your suggestion. For the section from Hong Shui Kiu to Tianhai, they do not need to alight actually. As we said, in that stop, we want to put in place co-location arrangements. If there is a Shenzhen base station, co-location arrangements will take place there. If it goes directly to Tianhai, there will also be co-location arrangements in Tianhai. So it is not the case that they need to alight and then get back on the vehicle again. In the Northern Metropolis, is it possible for us to add an express rail link? It is currently in the West Kowloon area. You need certain length for the railway or for the train to hit a high speed. Actually, this is a very good suggestion to add one more stop for the express rail. We have a new layout. Will we discuss with the mainland authorities in relation to the railway design to see how we can incorporate our railway network into the country? Well, actually, with the express rail link, we can already integrate into the development of the country. We will plan on adding more stops to see how we can facilitate better integration. We are leveraging on our express rail link to add more stations in the mainland. One more question for the design of the railway. Will we adopt the original design of the railways? You said that you would introduce more railway design and business models. I'd like more information in this connection. Under Secretary, we have independent railways. If we do not appoint the NTRCL, we will consider open bidding to introduce different designs or business operations. We are researching into this area. In a moment, at a later stage when we have information, we will report to the Legislative Council. Next, Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Madam Chair. On the Northern Metropolis, the Commissioner post. After reading the information papers and the administration's explanation, I appreciate the heavy workload of this position, so they want an independent officer to be responsible for this office. I understand this. For the Northern Link, if the Undersecretary has listened to us, the aim is 2034. That spans 3 terms of government offices. What if right now it spans 3 terms of the government to commission the Northern Link? Now that you already have manpower for the Northern Metropolis, then it shows the importance you attach to the Northern Metropolis, and you even have the commissioner for the Northern Metropolis Railways. At least you should give yourself a target. Is it the case now that you have this team, you have the commissioner for Northern Metropolis Railways? Can you effectively compress the timeline of the implementation of the Northern Link for the development of the Northern Metropolis? we have everything ready, but then what we lack is actually the transportation network. This will affect the attraction of enterprises to develop in this area. For the individual or independent links, you can consider open bidding if you are not going to ask for the MTRCL to better put in place these projects. For the Northern Link in the Northern Metropolis, it's been a while. How can you request them to compress the timeline? That is what I want to know. Thank you, Madam Chair. And the Secretary.
問題
Well, thank you, Mr. Holden Chow. Well, to expedite the railway projects has always been a goal of the government. Right now, the MTRC is helping us with planning. We have been in continuous talks with the MTRC to expedite the projects. We are currently streamlining administrative procedures to expedite the speed of the completion of infrastructure projects. Under the streamlined procedures, the projects under planning there may be a potential of expediting the progress of such projects as a result. Also, we will think about new models for projects for the contractors to use advanced technologies or with new ways of pre-planning. Through those, we believe that the progress of infrastructure projects can be further expedited. So we have a common goal here. We adopt a multi-pronged approach to expedite the progress of projects. Mr. Holden Chow, do you have any follow-up? No. All right. Thank you. Mr. Michael Tian, you're not a member of the subcommittee. You can only speak, but you cannot vote. Thank you, Chair. From the construction, implementation, and operation, it's like giving birth to a child. It's not just about giving birth. You have to nurture them. You have to educate them. You have to tend to them when they're sick. So from 2018, once the Hong Kong station, during its construction, there was a scandal because one of the contractors was too big to fail. They could do whatever they wanted. And a then director of highways, Mr. Charles-san, was busy and he was managing too many things. And then I moved a motion to rehaul the MTRC. There's the need for an independent department to not just give birth, as I said, you have to nurture them. So over the past years, five years, what had happened, apart from the scandal, there has been software errors, there has been signal system failures that caused delays, there has been electricity failures. So they make all kinds of excuses. There has also been hardware failures. We heard that there was unhooked. Well, I thought only exchange rate could be unlinked. And doors came off as well. So I need to remind the Undersecretary that with so much construction going on, such accidents are happening more often. So with the setting up of the Railways Department, it's not just about construction. You need a department to monitor the performance, because the office that you're proposing today is quite weird. It's quite weird because right now you need the EMSD to tend to the failure, because the director of electrical and mechanical services are not held accountable for your failure. So it could be many factors. So that's why I think there's a need for an independent department, independent from other offices that would tend to the hardware and software issues. You said that you're looking into it, but I'm very concerned because even with the construction, so many construction going on, even if infrastructure are constructed, if there's no independent department and if you only have an office under the highways department, for example, if signal systems of the 3 lines go down at the same time, or if there is an electricity failure, that has happened to the new lines as well, with so many accidents. When you're trying to hire that many people to construct other new projects, what's going to happen with the operations of existing ones? If I were Mr. Jimmy Chan, I would be quite concerned about such a high rate of accidents. So for the next time, when you go to the Finance Committee for a funding proposal, you need to set up a railways department. You need to have concrete plans before the end of the year. But you said you couldn't promise that by the end of the year. Now I give you another chance. I'll give you next year. Before July, can you give me a concrete answer as to whether the railways department can be set up? Otherwise, I cannot support the proposal at the Finance Committee. I would request that a division be ordered. Well, Undersecretary, please. Well, thank you, Mr. Tian. Of course, for the setting up of the railways department, we would want to enhance monitoring and controls and to take forward cross-boundary railway projects, and they would monitor the operations. That's the intention of setting up the railways department. For this new department, we would require the approval of the Legislative Council to set up the department. We do agree with Mr. Tian's suggestion that there's an urgent need to set that up, but we need to incorporate other members' views. Whether we can set it up before July, I don't think that's possible because we would need approval from the Legislative Council. No, I'm just saying you need to provide a paper by July of next year. Well, I have heard your views. We will take note of it and look into it in future. Next, it would be me, Mrs. Regina Ip. Well, my suggestion is quite different from that of Mr. Michael Tian. I do not object to the setting up of the Northern Metropolis Railways Office because there are so many new projects. And there are projects that include cross-boundary infrastructure. And I think this is completely different from the setting up of a railways department because this is something relatively short-term, 7 years. But the railways department is a permanent department. The expenditure and the manpower would have a long-standing effect on the establishment. With this office, it is because the RDS, the Railway Development Strategy, did not account for such needs. That's why there was no office then. What Mr. Michael Tian mentioned about the Sha-Tin Central Link, that monitoring has to be enhanced. The nature of the duties is quite different with railways. MTRC has subcontracted its tasks to subcontractors. So now you want more people to monitor them on top of the monitoring of MTRC. So that's the checkers of checkers. So the list can go on. Some have complained that with the new NMRO, it has caused difficulties in hiring. I have a simple survey actually from 2012 to 2022. There are 400 directorate positions created, over 200 in Highways Department for the CEDD over the past 10 years. It created over 600 directorate positions. Is it non-directorate? Well, the one I have here is for directorate positions. The changes in directorate positions. From what I can see, for engineering departments, the directorate departments, is it not that many? I'll look into the table with you after the meeting, perhaps. But what I'm saying is, for the duties of the Highways Department or the EMSD, well, in that case, should their ranks of the head of Highways Department or EMSD be lowered? Because we have to think about that. We can't just expand the establishment. As a LegCo member, you need to do more than speaking. That's why I'm thinking, as a member of my political party, I do support the proposal. As we know, with the Sha-Tin Central Link accidents, and there has been delays and going over budget with Sha-Tin Central Link and Express Railway Link. The core problem, I believe, lies with the business model of the MTRC. If we take another model that is ownership model instead, if the profit of the company is at stake, they would be look into the issue more closely. So we shouldn't just use the entrustment model. Instead, we should use the ownership model. Will we need that many people to monitor MTRC's performance? And how many people do we need to deploy on site to monitor the performance? I'll see what the administration has to say about that. Well, I do take note of the chair lady's views. I have been liaising with the chair lady and members for quite some time. With the setting up of the Railways Department, members have different views. So with the taking forward of the projects and operations, we will look into whether there is any room for improvement, and we'll conduct a review in due course whether there's a need to set up a Railways Department next Mr. Dennis Leung. I also support the development of the Northern Metropolis. I, however, have concerns about the setting up of the NMRO. Can the administration elaborate on, apart from Northern Link, Main Line and Spur Line? I believe for the plans beyond 2030, we also have other railway projects such as the Cheung Kwan O project. How is your division of labor going to meet the demands for other projects as well? Because for the Central Rail Link, it is going to extend to Kowloon Tong. How many stations will be needed to accommodate the needs of residents? Because we do support the proposal for that. Also, with the Hongshui Q line, we have suggested that this railway may be for people going to work. However, members of the public may have different expectations because they think it's a cross-boundary railway infrastructure. So how are you going to reconcile that with your expectation that it is going to be a local railway infrastructure as well? With the Hongshui-Q infrastructure, it's the same thing, because people in Shenzhen may think that the railway link extends to the artificial island in Central Waters or Sunny Bay. So people may have different expectations. Can you explain how you're going to reconcile that? Also, you said that you have to enhance the speed and efficiency for new development areas. We had to wait 10 to 15 years for new railway infrastructure. So how can you make sure that transport infrastructure is ready for members of the public to move into new development areas? Thank you, Chair.
主席，
Under Secretary. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Dennis Lang, for the 4 questions. On the Hongshui-Q to Qianhai line nature, and for the extension line in the Hong Kong territory, I will invite the Director of Highways to answer this question. Of course, enhancing speed and efficiency is our purpose, but the establishment of railways is more complicated than that of roads, and that takes more time. We can only make transitional arrangements if we cannot accommodate the population intake. But of course, we want to take an infrastructure-led and capacity-creating approach. That is our planning principles, which are in line with the members' view. We are at the same time taking forward other railway projects. That is the RDO. What railways do we need to take forward faster and which are under the pipeline? Actually, not only the railways in the Northern Metropolis, but for all railway projects in Hong Kong, we will also consider all of them in tandem. And I will invite Mr. Jimmy Chan to add a little bit. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Dennis Lang. For the line from Hongshui-Q to Qianhai, it has 2 functions within Hong Kong from Hongshui-Q to the boundary control point. It will go through Hongshui-Q, Hachun, and Laofaoshan. For the railway in the pipeline, we will consider adding more stations. And that is what another member mentioned, as it is a part of our local railway network. Apart from local railway network, we will also have a cross-boundary railway network. In Shenzhen Bay and Tianhai, there will be stations. So for Hong Kong railway networks, the network can be a cross-boundary railway project. That is to say, people can cross the border on this line. We will add a Hongshui-Q station in the Tuen Ma line. There will be connectivity with local railway network in Central Waters Artificial Island. There will also be a railway project. There will be connectivity as well. Our planning is to add a station in Hongshui-Q. It will be a local railway network or a cross-boundary hub. Well, I mean a knob, and that is our planning. Next, Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, Madam Chair. In principle, for the proposed creation of 3 supernumerary positions, I support it. Last week, it was the first Chief Executive interactive sections. The Chief Executive asked Mr. Chan Chen-ying about East Wing Bond. In this connection, there will be steering committee as well as advisory councils led by the Chief Executive and the Chief Secretary for Administration. These position holders will not take forward these projects, but to what level will these position holders help in this connection in order to drive projects with great potential in the commercial industry? I believe that the Northern Metropolis will bring a lot of different business opportunities in order to leverage the commercial or business potential, in order to realize the capable market and the government. How can these position holders give play to these advantages? Thank you, Mr. Robert Lee, for your support. On the funding arrangement of railway projects, it is a very important topic indeed. So, for colleagues responsible for this area, through different studies, they will provide suggestions which will be considered by the government. These are very solid research work. Any follow-up? Can you be more specific? Of course, I'm not expecting them to conduct a very detailed analysis. But on every level, they also need to promote business opportunities or leverage different business sectors' potential. For concrete work, I will invite the Director of Highways. On these new railway funding arrangements, we are looking into the cross-boundary project of Hongshui-Q to Qianhai line with the Shenzhen municipal government. There were new arrangements of new railway projects as well as a new promotion mode. These lines are actually independent. So they will have innovative funding arrangements. Well, I mean financing arrangements with railway plus property mode. This will be a new option. We will invite consultants to provide opinions on financing arrangements. We have an open-minded approach, whether by issuing bonds or by other methods. Apart from completing the projects, we also want to help the property market to provide more options. So in the future, in implementing more projects, they will stand in good stead. Mr. Robert Lee, any follow-up? No, thanks. Next, Dr. Lo Wai-kwok. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the blueprint of the Northern Metropolis, it will accommodate 2 million people. There will be important industries. It will also connect to Shenzhen as an important area to develop the GBA. Based on the planning principles of capacity creating and infrastructure led, The administration would like to increase manpower to establish the NMRO to set the stage for railway projects. For the successful implementation to improve the livelihood, of course, we will support this direction. For the infrastructure-led and capacity-creating planning principles, I have given my comments on a lot of occasions. It seems that it has already become empty talk. For a lot of railway projects that should have been completed are still in the early stages. Some of them have not been commissioned. In 2014, the administration mentioned the 7 railway projects. There were roadmaps, there were timetables, there were proposals, but then there is actually a very serious lag. These transport infrastructures should be considered as a supply-driven method instead of demand-driven method. In any case, there is still a very serious lag. For Hongshou Station, Northern Link, Spur Line, etc., they should have been commissioned in 2014. You have not yet cleared all the debts, but then you are accumulating even more debts. At that time, I criticized for removing the very important railway connecting Hong Kong to Shenzhen. Right now, you are willing to do it, connecting Hongshou to Qianhai. For the Northern Link extension, these can be said to be new lines. But what about the old debts? You should repay these old debts, so to speak, as soon as possible. So I still need to criticize the situation. The infrastructure-led planning principle shouldn't be empty talk. You must give effect to these planning principle. You need to better prepare this area so that it will become an area that has good livelihood, and it will also become an important area for the development of the GBA. In order to build better connectivity among the 9 different cities, there will also be complementarity of different advantages. Thank you, Dr. Low, for his support for the establishment of the NMRO. We have heard the criticism of Dr. Low. In our reply to Mr. Tong Li-che, we have tried to set out all the timetables that we have, be it RDS 2014 or for the relevant railways of the Northern Metropolis, or even for the strategic study on railways beyond 2030. We are taking forward all these in parallel. In late March, we completed a consultation. After taking the pulse of the public, in the 4th quarter of 2030, we will build a blueprint on the future transportation infrastructure. We hope that we will be able to give you details about the implementation or the commission date. I hope that members can see our efforts. Previously, there was a window about the new railway projects. I hope that you can repay the old debts as soon as possible, so to speak, and you can also take forward the new projects expeditiously. Next, Mr. So Chang-Wang. For the Hong Kong transport infrastructures, we have been enhancing the scale. And first of all, I agree to increase the manpower. but I do not quite understand. Well, there is actually RDO under the Highways Department, as far as I understand. There is complete manpower for the implementation of railway projects. I'm not saying that it is enough or not, but then it has a complete manpower. From planning all the way to construction, to financing, to management. It is an integrated process. So we cannot fully handle the situation just by adding one more new department. Instead, the RDO has this structure, has this manpower to take forward this project. And I believe that it will be better for it to play a coordinating role. To add dozens of people to enhance the speed, efficiency, quantity, and quality for the Northern Metropolis, well, I think this is only a slogan. For any project in Hong Kong, we also need to enhance the speed and efficiency. If you think that you can enhance speed, efficiency, and quantity just by adding one more department, that is not scientific, in my opinion. For the NMRO, after its establishment, how will be the division of labor or work between the NMRO and the RDO? What about the management, the manpower? Can all these support the development of the Northern Metropolis? Any overlapping of portfolios between these two units?
I'll let the director talk about the division of labor and their support for each other. Well, with the division of labor between the NMRO and the RDO, the NMRO is mainly responsible for projects in the Northern Metropolis, including Northern Link, Kowloon Station, Hung Shui Q Station, and cross-boundary railway infrastructure that is from Hung Shui Q to Shanghai and Northern Link Spur Line. As you heard earlier, these are all in the Northern Metropolis. For other plans, for other projects outside of the Northern Metropolis, for the projects that are ongoing, that would include Oyster Bay Station, Tuen Mun South Extension, is Kowloon Elevated Transit System, Trackless Transit System. They are in the designing and planning stage, or some of them, the construction works have already begun. With the strategic studies on railways and major roads beyond 2030, the RDO is currently taking forward the consultations. Actually, they've just been completed in March. After consolidation, in fourth quarter of this year, we'll have a blueprint for major transport infrastructure in future. The CEDD and Planning Department, we have worked with them to have a new railway project to support the new development areas. So these are the projects that we have been working on. So as you can see, of course, there are important railway projects for the Northern Metropolis. There are other railway projects in Hong Kong that are very important that have to be taken forward as well. As I said earlier, the RDO will be responsible for projects outside the Northern Metropolis. Well, I think you didn't answer my question. Well, you didn't have to give an answer right now. I hope the government can do better with its management. they can share resources so that there is better and more efficient coordination. Undersecretary, yes, we're actually working on that. It's just that the director did not have enough time to say that. The NMRO in future, whether it's professional officers or technical officers, they will support each other professionally. Next, Mr. Edmund Wong. Actually, I want to ask Chair, what role are they playing in the project? Because we're talking about an area with a population of 2 million without a specific person to handle the infrastructure projects. It's hard to take forward. However, we need to make sure we are monitoring the performance of the contractors of MTRC. We need to make sure we're monitoring the performance, but that is another part of the heavy workload. With what Mr. Dennis Leung said, whether it can be done before 2030. If it is not possible, the department said they would have other transport infrastructure for that. I actually saw in the news today, after population intake at Queen Hill, residents have complained that they have to wait for 30 minutes to get back to Queen's Hill. And if they leave at 7 something in the morning, they can only get to Wan Chai at 8 something. Of course, with the new population, there's bound to be an increase of transport duration. However, we do see the need for such infrastructure to be completed by 2030. However, with this position created, you should have figures to support your decision. So can you give a promise that by 31st of July 2030, you can complete this project and this MNRO will not allow for any delays? Because with the establishment subcommittee, we have seen several proposals where there have been proposed creation or retention of posts for their proposals. Thank you, Chair. Well, I do understand what Mr. Edmund Wong said, that the completion of projects should tie in with new population intake. However, looking at the schedule, from what we can see now, the Northern Link can only be completed by 2034. If we have to expedite it for it to be completed by 2030, it's quite difficult. However, as I said earlier, we've been looking into the streamlining of procedures. We hope to be more innovative to expedite the projects. So we would at least want to expedite the projects by a little. As for whether it can be completed by 2030, for railway projects relevant to the Northern Metropolis, many of them are ongoing. With this 7-year supernumerary posts, why is it that it's 7 years? Because for the 3 years, including the Officer Bay Station, Tuen Mun South Extension, and Kowloon Extension, I believe the projects can be completed in the meantime between 2029 to 2030. So we would like to review the manpower arrangements then, once those projects have been completed, to see if there's any room for adjustment of manpower, to see if we need to retain these proposed posts. We'll conduct a review in due course. Thank you. Well, thank you, Chair. Do you have any follow-up? Well, is it the case that you may need to retain these posts in future? Of course, one of the projects will need to be completed, is scheduled to be completed by 2034. So is it the case that you have plans to retain the posts after that, after 7 years? Well, as I said, in the 7th year, we'll conduct a review to see if the posts have to be retained. Of course, we would require the approval of the Legislative Council to retain the posts. Well, Mr. Edmund Wong, your concerns are definitely valid because for the ferry pier posts, they have been there for 10 odd years. Yes, Chair, it's the same case with the West Kowloon Cultural Authority. Next, second round for Dr. Tony Che, 4 minutes. Of course, the Northern Metropolis is very important to the future of Hong Kong. To make sure railway infrastructure and road infrastructure are in place for the Northern Metropolis, the setting up of the NMROs is necessary. However, for my first round, from my past experience with the Highways Department and the CEDD, I've seen that there are many chief engineers responsible for railway projects in the Northern Metropolis. So the division of labor is very important once the NMRO is set up. For example, in Annex 8, as we said earlier, Chief Engineer Railway Development 1-1. It is responsible for the taking forward of Northern Link spur line and so on. So once the chief engineer for Northern Metropolis Railways is created, well, it is supposed to be handled by the NMRO after NMRO has been set up. So will they have a large workload after that? Also, with Chief Engineer 1-3, they're responsible for the Tuen Mun South Extension project. Of course, they also have other duties, from what I can see here. With the allocation of work, do you not have to wait after 7 years to review the arrangement? Because right now with the allocation of work, I think you need to think about that right now. Because for Chief Engineer Railway Development 1-2, it is responsible for Pak Shek Kok Station and Island Line North. There's also the Hong Shui Q South project. So that's the cause of my concern. I think you need to delineate work a little more clearly. If everything has to be decided by the Director of Highways, it's going to be very inefficient. So I think the administration can elaborate a bit more on the division of labor. As for the detailed division of labor, I'll let the director give supplementary information on that. But of course, we will want to rationalize the division of labor. After the NMRO is set up, under the existing Railway Development Office, there are actually many ongoing projects for the chief engineers. Even though some of their workload may be transferred to the NMRO, their workload is actually getting heavier. I'll let the director get into the division of labor.
Director. For these chief engineers, in enclosure 8, Their responsibilities are listed in this enclosure, be it under the existing RDO or the future NMRO. Their portfolios have not changed. For Kutong Station, Hongshoukyu Station, they all require these chief engineer positions. These are not only the Northern Metropolis Railway projects, there are also other projects. So for these chief engineers, they are responsible for the projects in the Northern Metropolis and also those that are not in the Northern Metropolis. In their respective portfolios, they will report to the head of the RDO or the future commissioner of the NMR. They will report their work. So they will not have less workload. They will also have a clear division of labor or work. They will report to the Commissioner for Northern Metropolis Railways, that is the existing RDO head. This is very clear. Where there are uncertainties, I will also help coordinate. That is, I will decide on which office should be responsible. Mr. Tong Li-che, just one point. If you have additional work on top of their current portfolio, at least you are proposing the creation of 2 chief engineers. Does it mean that this is not fair to the existing manpower? That is, there will not be less workload, so will the current manpower enjoy much lighter workload? Well, this is definitely not the case. You can see the workload right now. There are 2 chief engineers. One will be responsible for taking forward the Hongshoukyu to Qianhai project. As the Undersecretary said, as it is an independent railway, we are considering different methods to take this project forward. Whenever there is new method, then this will be quite different from using our established methods for the legal framework, financing arrangements, and the future business model. We will also have to come up with a new model. And we will also have to coordinate with mainland counterparts, as cross-boundary railway network requires the concerted efforts of the 2 places in order to become effective. For the other chief engineer, the chief engineer will also have to consider different methods to take it forward. For example, by identifying new subcontractors, the method of procurement, for example, needs new standards, or what methods to use in procurement. These are not very conventional methods that have been used. So we need dedicated manpower to come up with the best, the most well-rounded method. The workload is indeed heavy, and the workload is not lighter than any of the chief engineers. Right now, there are 3 members who would like to who would like to speak in the second round. Ms. Elizabeth Quad will speak in the first round. Any more follow-up by members? For example, does Mr. Tong Li-che have any follow-up? No. Anyone speaking in the first round? No. Given the time, we will extend. Well, this meeting will end at 11 o'clock, and I think that time is enough. Ms. Elizabeth Quad. Thank you, Madam Chair. Given the importance of the development of the Northern Metropolis, based on the planning principles of infrastructure-led and capacity creating, I agree and I support with establishing the Northern Metropolis Railways Office. You want to connect to the GBA to foster its development. I am also in support of this. In the paper, you said that the NMRO will use the railways as a backbone, and the development of Changkwano immediately came into my mind. A lot of residents in Changkwano always think that using railways as a backbone is not a bad idea. Its intention is actually good, but when more people are moving into Changkwano, transport infrastructures cannot catch up with the swelling population in Changkwano. For example, there were insufficient trips going to Lohas Park when there are transportation issues such as signaling system malfunction. Then all residents in the Changkwano area will become a silo, so to speak. They have difficulty commuting. Now we have flyovers, we have roads, but then we are saying that the railways will be the backbone of transportation. Transportation infrastructures are being taken forward slowly. The Northern Metropolis will also use railways as the backbone. I'd like to know, for the NMRO, what we need to consider is not just the establishment or construction of railways. Instead, we need to consider the infrastructure-led transportation structure. Taking Changkwano as an example, the flyovers, roads, they were introduced or commissioned after a long period of time. You shouldn't just bank on railways. You need to tie in with other transportation infrastructures, such as connectivity among roads, railways, etc. You cannot just rely on railways. You also need other transport infrastructures. If there are insufficiencies in other transportation infrastructures, there will also be a lot of bottlenecks, especially on monitoring and management. Citizens may think that the MTRCL cannot cope with the burden. There are issues with management, and people will also be worried about the future development of the Northern Metropolis. We have already taken stock of the situation and learned a lesson on the transportation infrastructure in the Northern Metropolis. For the construction of flyovers and roads or other transportation infrastructures, how will you coordinate all these projects? How can you make sure that the transport infrastructures will be doing well? Of course, when it comes to coordination, it will be coordinated by the Transport and Logistics Bureau. For coordination, the Highways Department and the Transport Department will also help. For strategic studies on railways and major roads beyond 2030, we also cover trunk roads aside from railways. Northern Metropolis Trunk Road, Shatin Bypass, etc. These are beneficial to the western and northern traffic as well as other connectivity. They will build the road network in order for new population intake to be able to move in. So it is without doubt that we are adopting the planning principles of infrastructure-led and capacity creating. But given the scale and complexity in terms of time, more often than not, it will be slower. But then we are taking forward these projects in parallel, and I hope that this answers the question of Ms. Elizabeth Quat. I'd like to follow up on the manpower question. You need sufficient manpower to take forward all these railway projects. Will you also analyze the manpower requirement in the NMRO? On manpower, it is related to the construction industry and different talents. But I can go through in brief. Last week, the Labor and Welfare Bureau has announced extending the scope of the talent list of which there are a dozen or so items related to the construction industry in the government department or in the MTRCL. We will consider adding more manpower depending on the situation. For example, we need to increase manpower when we are going to establish the NMRO, and this is one of the areas for MTRCL. If there are new railway projects, there will also have to be sufficient manpower. For the construction industry, we also need talents from this industry. The Construction Council has already completed construction worker studies. They have considered a basket of factors to see how they can plug the gap of the manpower needed in the construction industry. I believe when we take a multi-pronged approach, we can successfully plug the gap of insufficiencies in manpower. Second round, myself. Well, on the one hand, we need to import workers. Last week, in the Chief Executive Interactive section in the Legislative Council, he mentioned two industries, that is, the construction industry and the transportation industry. There will be importation of workers. It will also attract more workers to join the industries. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Robert Lee. The government has already responded to this question. The Hongshui-Q and Tianhai Railway will be independent, and it does not have to be constructed by the MTRCL, as it is not an extension line. You can construct it by way of bonding, as a way of financing. But of course, investors have to calculate their returns to decide whether they will take part in it. Apart from the Hongshui-Q to Tianhai Railway, which is quite independent, are there any other railways, any other similar railways? Will you discuss the financing arrangements with the FSTB? Usually, we will engage an investment bank to provide opinions in this connection. Are you already doing all these? Actually, all these fronts are under the purview of the Financial Secretary, and hence different bureaus under his purview. The government will have to take a holistic approach to consider the financing arrangements of different major transportation infrastructures. For railways, we will also provide opinions based on different studies. There is a Deputy Financial Secretary who will be coordinate all these work. The FSTB will also be under his purview. Apart from Hongshui-Q to Tianhai line, it is difficult to finance these financial extension lines. For MTRCL projects, we will also discuss financing arrangements with them. Previously, we used the Railway Plus property mode. We also tried to disperse cash allowances. When the government has to financially give allowance, we also need to consider the financing arrangements. We will also have to draw funds from the Capital Works Reserve Fund. How to increase the fund? Issuing bond is also one of the options. So how can we come up with different methods in relation to the financing of infrastructure projects? I believe that the Financial Secretary will also discuss with different bureaus. Well, I think I have to side with Mr. Dennis Lang, and we have to ask about the progress. If the MTRCL does not think that there will be enough passengers, then they will not be willing to take up the project. There will only be passengers only in the morning and in the evening peak hours. For the western section of the Island South Line, they are not just considering the heavy rail mode, they are also considering other methods. I will invite the Director of Highways to add a little bit. Mr. Jimmy Chen. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the western section of the Island South Line, we are considering some planning, or we are actually carrying out some planning to see how we can take forward the west part of the Island South Line. Some of it is actually in Wafu Estate. There is a redevelopment project going on. Some stations will be subject to the progress of the South Island Line. So, in terms of the timetable, we also need to tie in with the redevelopment project of Wafu Estate on the method or the mode of railways. The MTRCL has provided some preliminary suggestions. We are considering the feasibility of these suggestions. As the Undersecretary said, we are considering different methods apart from heavy railways. Are there any viable options or other more cost-effective options to take forward this part of the railway? These are also under our consideration. We aim to identify a solution that is the most cost-effective.
Well, I just want to say something. Can you urge the Housing Bureau to expedite the plans of redevelopment of Wafu Estate and give an explanation to us as soon as possible? Of course, we will. Thank you, Chair. Next, Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, Chair. Again, my concern is from the administration reply. They will appoint the MTRC to conduct further studies. So for the government's projects, whether it's Northern Link or the railway infrastructure in the strategic studies, the Central Rail Link or Hongshui-Kyu or Changkun O extension, how many of the projects did you appoint the MTRC to do it, and when is the deadline? From past experience, upon government's appointment of the projects, many members of the public's views are not incorporated, so the project do not meet the public's expectation. So what can we do to meet their expectations? For example, to have the railway project extend to Hong Kong Island, or for another railway project that could extend to Kwun Tong. Well, in 1 to 2 years, perhaps the alignment will be ready. If you can provide more information in the interim period so that members of the public or electrical members would have better expectations on that. Director of Highways, please. Well, regarding what Mr. Leung said, I would like to clarify something regarding the strategic studies on railways and major roads beyond 2030. This study was undertaken by the Highways Department and the Transport Department. Well, it does not include the MTRC because at the planning stage, it is government-led, so that we can come up with a strategy for future railways and major roads. We have asked the MTRC to submit proposals on other projects, such as the projects in the RDS 2014, including ongoing projects such as the Tongcheng Line extension, Oyster Bay Station, and Tuen Mun South extension. We hope to commence the works by mid this year, and the construction of Kutong Station will also commence this year. The works of Hongshui Q Station will commence next year. So that's the overall plans for these projects. As for the Central Rail Link, the alignment and the relevant arrangements, in March, we have completed the public consultations on the project. We have received quite a lot of comments, and we have heard what Mr. Dennis Leung said from public views. After this, we will consolidate public views and we will incorporate appropriate views into our overall railway network plans so that we can have a better and more reliable network. After consolidating the views at the end of this year, we will propose a blueprint for railway and transport infrastructure across the territory. We will also include methods to take forward proposals in the blueprint. Now, for the second round, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, well, Mr. Tang Fei, for someone who has just come in, do you have any questions? If not, I'll draw the line here. Was it Dr. So Chang Wing, second round also? Anyone else? If not, I'll definitely draw the line here. Now, first, Mr. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Well, on behalf of the engineering industry, I have to sigh for them because sometimes they have so much work, but sometimes they have no work at all. With railway development, you have to take it step by step. For each step, you would have the relevant personnel working on that area of work, and it would take all of them working together to complete a project. For the RDS 2014 projects, after they have been announced, we're quite happy about that because finally the plans are undertaken in steps. However, the government is having some blank periods in between. And for people in the industry, that is terrible because they will have no income during those periods. So this problem is just repeating itself over and over again. With the Northern Metropolis projects, of course, they are necessary. So now we're at that stage where people are overworked. What can we do about that? I believe many members are concerned about that as well. Well, with the government's proposal, I hope that we can all put our heads together and have plans for local and overseas professionals to work together to build a better railway network. Well, I don't think the administration can give us any more information. However, for the engineering sector, it's quite hard because we can't let you not create posts. We have to think about these blank periods as well as the overwork periods. Well, any answer to give? Well, with the projects, we want to take them forward in an orderly manner to match with the development. Thank you, Chair. Any follow-up? No? Dr. So Chang Wing, please. Well, thank you, Chair. Well, I want to follow up on my questions from earlier because the specific questions that I asked was for the existing RDO. What role do they play in terms of coordination and support? Because from what you said earlier, I believe they're done separately. So RDO will be working on projects outside the Northern Metropolis, and NMRO will be responsible for those inside the Northern Metropolis. And I find that quite shocking because the experience capabilities of the existing RDO cover all projects across the territory. Once the NMRO is set up for the new manpower, how efficient are they going to be when they take up the work? So with the overall planning, with the government's management of resources or the allocation of work, how can you make sure resources are deployed efficiently, especially with the capabilities of manpower? When you say such initiatives are such urgent and important initiatives, of course, I would agree with the fact that the posts have to be created. But how can you make sure they can adjust to the new duties when you already have existing manpower to take forward such projects? So I have my doubts about that. So I would like to follow up on this question in particular. Well, Undersecretary, please. Well, I'll perhaps try to give an answer on this question, whether it's railway projects inside or outside the Northern Metropolis. They have to report to the Director of Highways. So there's the part about overall coordination. As for professional support, even though there are 2 offices, but there will be mutual support of the non-directorate personnel under the directors. Well, with the directorate posts that we're proposing to create, they are very experienced in the railway, and we would require them to be experienced. So it's most likely the case that existing personnel will be deployed to the NMRO. We wouldn't have someone completely unfamiliar with railway projects to work in the NMRO. Well, I'm not doubting the expertise of the personnel you're going to hire. It's about the management, the structure, because they have to try to adjust to each other's workflow. If you have RDO personnel there, they have already adjusted to each other. Well, as I said earlier, Director of Highways will issue instructions if there's anything unclear. Thank you, Dr. So, however, for your suggestion. Well, any follow-up? If not, well, we have completed the Q&A session. I will put the item to vote. Members in favor of the proposal EC 2023 to 24/6, please raise your hands. Members against the proposal, please raise your hands. No one? All right, I declare the proposal endorsed. Now we need to put to vote whether the subcommittee has to make a recommendation. Recommends further discussion by the Finance Committee of the proposal in EC 2023 to 24/6 that was endorsed by the subcommittee. Now, according to paragraph 2 of the Establishment Subcommittee procedure, the subcommittee has to make a recommendation on whether there should be further discussion of the item by the Finance Committee. Now, in accordance with paragraph 48 of the Establishment Subcommittee procedure, I put the following question to vote. The subcommittee recommends further discussion by the Finance Committee of the proposal in EC 2023 to 24/6 that was endorsed by the subcommittee. I remind members that if this question is endorsed, it means that the Establishment Subcommittee recommends that the Finance Committee further discuss the item. If the question is not endorsed, it means that the subcommittee does not recommend further discussion of the item by the Finance Committee. Members in favor of the question, please raise your hands. No one? Members against the question, please raise your hands. I believe most of the members who voted on the item were against the question. So the question is negative. That is, the subcommittee does not recommend further discussion of item EC 2023-24-6 by the Finance Committee. Now, agenda item number 2. Propose creation of 3 supernumerary posts / time-limited non-civil service positions of 1 administrative officer staff grade AD6 or D6 equivalent non-civil service position, 1 administrative officer staff grade B D3 or D3 equivalent non-civil service position, and 1 assistant director of municipal services D2 in the Culture, Sports and Tourism Bureau for 2 years and 6 months, from 1st of October 2023 up to 31st of March 2026, for the establishment of the National Games Coordination Office to take forward the planning and implementation of the 15th National Games and 12th National Games for people with disabilities and the 9th National Special Olympic Games in Hong Kong. Well, the administration and the panel on Home Affairs, Culture and Sports discussed the item on 8th of May 2023. Representatives in attendance include Mr. Reslin Lau, Undersecretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism, Mr. Paul Ching, Acting Commissioner for Sports, Mr. Benjamin Hong, Assistant Director of Leisure and Cultural Services, Leisure Services 2. Mr. Vincent Ching is the chairman of the panel. I'll let him brief us on the proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the 8th of May 2023, the panel on Home Affairs, Culture and Sports discussed this proposal. Members asked the administration, when planning the manpower of the National Games Coordination Office, or NGCO, whether it had drawn reference from the experience of staging sports events. Members were also concerned whether there would be sufficient manpower to handle the heavy workload. The administration said that this establishment recommendation had drawn reference from experience of holding the 2009 East Asian Games, or for short EAG. Considering holding the national games entails quite heavy duties of coordination and communication. The HKSAR must play all parts and shoulder all responsibilities in the national games. If the National Games Coordination Office needs to increase manpower after coming into cooperation, the administration will consult the Legislative Council in due course. Members think that the above directorate officers should have a wealth of professional knowledge of sports and experience of communication and cooperation with the units in the mainland. Some members suggested engaging those in the sport industry who assisted in holding the 2009 EAG. The administration replied that the head of deputy head of the NGCO can be a civil servant at a directorate level or a non-civil servant at the same level. This arrangement allows the government more flexibility in recruiting suitable talents in different sectors of the community. Members also asked whether the administration had looked into the possibility that the current directorate officers can double sideways in the NGCO. The administration explained that holding the NGCO involves a lot of complicated work in a short period of time. To ensure that this work receives sufficient attention and steer, the administration would indeed have to set up a dedicated team alongside the current senior management. Members supported endorsing this proposal to the Establishment Subcommittee. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Vincent Chang. Professor Chen Wen-Kwong, Mr. Tang Fei, and Mr. Lai Tong-Kwok are waiting to speak 5 minutes each. First, Professor Chen. Thank you, Madam Chair. For Hong Kong to cooperate with Macau and Guangdong Province to hold the national games, that is the 15th National Games, I am indeed very glad to learn this, and I support the establishment of the NGCO to stage an impressive national games. To create supernumerary positions and time-limited positions, I have the following questions. 1. In enclosure 2, 3, and 4, I noticed the head, deputy head, and an assistant head of the NGCO, some of their portfolios actually overlap with one another. For example, they have to maintain liaison with mainland counterparts, and this gives the impression that some portfolios are actually overlapping with one another. I'd like the administration to explain the concrete responsibilities among these three officers. Must all three officers be responsible for all these tasks together? Can one single officer be responsible for some tasks? Is it necessary for all three directorate officers to be responsible for some tasks? For the NGCO, does it have KPI? That is, how many rounds of promotional events? How many people do you aim to attract? What targets do you have? I hope the administration can provide more detailed information in order to garner the support of members as well as citizens in order to be in support of your proposal. Thank you, Madam Chair. Indeed, for enclosures 2, 3, and 4, some portfolios are overlapping one another. This is mainly due to the very complex nature of staging the NGCO. There are different levels of conferences. Some must be attended by the head, some by the deputy head, some by the assistant head. There are different meetings at different levels, as it involves three places after all. There are a whole raft of different projects, so it is not the case that all three officers are responsible for the very same tasks. If there are different meetings or projects taking place at the same time, then they can have division of labor. Hong Kong will be responsible for 8 sports events. There are also 4 to 5 mass participation events. Altogether, there are a dozen or so events. So our first KPI is to get these events done. That is 8 events plus 4 to 5 events. And we also need to collaborate with the General Administration of Sport of China, or GACS for short, in order to draw more support and to complement the community. And we will give an account to the Legislative Council in due course. Any follow-up? No follow-up. I will extend the meeting by 15 minutes. Next, Mr. Tang Fei. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Undersecretary. Of course, Hong Kong has the opportunity to co-host the National Games and the National Special Olympics Games. This is indeed a very good idea. It is not easy for Hong Kong to co-host these events. The last occasion was 2009 East Asian Games, or EAG for short. This will be even more impressive than the previous time, as we are going to co-host 2 sporting events. My question is that, in my impression, EAG, well, actually, in holding the EAG, we drew different officers in different bureaus, as well as some from the LCSD. My wife is actually working in the LCSD, hence my greater understanding in this area. Are you going to draw officers, that is, the current civil servants, from different bureaus, or are you going to engage non-civil servants? These sporting events will be held in the entire 2025, whole year round, and it will, well, these positions will continue to run until the 31st of March 2026. That is the ending date of a financial year, after which there will be no these positions. If there are sporting events or similar mega events requiring coordination, will you create these positions yet again? Thank you, Madam Chair. On the supernumerary positions, we hope to have flexibility by engaging civil servants and non-civil servants. Given the complexity of the projects, this will give us flexibility in engaging the best talents to be responsible for these events. Apart from these 3 supernumerary positions, we also need the cooperation of different bureaus. We have a coordination committee chaired by the CS4A. Different bureaus and departments will also assist. Different officers will also be seconded to the National Games Coordination Office to provide assistance. So, this is a mega event in which all officers from different departments and bureaus will also take part. Indeed, after these sporting events, this position will lapse. In the future, when there are new mega events or sporting events, we will have regard to the prevailing circumstances and require the creation of new positions as the situation varies from one another. Any follow-up? No. Next, Mr. Lai Tongkwok. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Hong Kong government will co-host the National Games with Macau. This is a very important sporting event. So we need new positions to hold these events well. Well, I agree to this. I see no problem. We draw reference from holding mega sporting events in the past. For example, for Equestrian Olympics and the 2009 EAG. In the past, we didn't create directorate officers. Instead, we set up a company and we looked for talents. The course you are taking is vastly different from the previous practice. Can you tell us why you did not use the previous practice? Instead, you are using a new practice to carry out all these preparation work. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lai. Well, for the equestrian race and the EAG, they were mainly held by the International Olympic Association or community organizations. The government provided assistance, whereas the National Games is different in nature. It is a sort of internal event held by the nation. It is held and hosted by the nation. Hong Kong, Macau, and Guangdong province are the same. The governments will take part in management and the hosting of these events. The government actually takes part in holding these events. In the course of holding equestrian races, despite no positions created, we actually set up an equestrian company to hold these events. The officers were actually on the same rank of D8, D6, and D3. The hierarchy is actually a little bit lower than the equestrian rates. But the office is comparable to the previous sporting event held, as a lot of different sporting events will have to be prepared in a very short period of time. On the second question, in your document, you mention that a permanent secretary will be responsible for the office underpinned by different directorate officers. Why do you not ask the D6 position to be responsible for this office? Instead, you are asking a permanent secretary that is pitched at D8 level who is already very busy and occupied. What is the rationale behind? Under Secretary. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Member. For the head of the NGCO, this position holder will be responsible for coordination and steer, but the permanent secretary is holding and even higher capacity. So in the 5 coordinating committees, they will span different bureaus. So the permanent secretary will be heading all these 5 coordinating committees, manifesting the fact that the government attaches great importance to the staging of these events. You can see from the overall structure, the chief executive will play the role of a patron, and the CS4A will also be the chairman of the overall steering committee or the organizing committee. This shows that the entire government is going to take forward these sporting events.
My third question is for the national games. It's not just Hong Kong. Macau will also take part in the hosting of the events. How many events will they host specifically, and what are their manpower arrangements? Did you make references to their manpower arrangements? Well, thank you, Chair. I'll let the Commissioner of Sports, at least at this stage, he is responsible for liaising with Guangdong and Macau. In our understanding, the Macau, well, at least the preliminary proposal, because it has to be approved by the GASC, including basketball, fencing, ping pong, and indoor basketball. And they also have taekwondo and dragon boat racing. Well, I'm not sure if they will have any additional manpower to host the events. Next, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chair. Why, I believe if Hong Kong can successfully host the national games events, it is going to be great for Hong Kong. With the Kai Tak Sports Park, we hope that the completion of the sports park can act in tandem with the development. I believe there are many paragraphs in the paper on the construction of the sports park and the progress. So it is believed that the sports park can tie in with the hosting of the events. Well, I have certain doubts because there are many infrastructure works to be performed, and there is a shortage of manpower in the construction industry. So I want to see what the administration's conclusion is about these problems. Well, this item is not about Kai Tak Sports Park. However, many members of public have expressed that they want to host the golfing event in Hong Kong as well. And are there any facilities for the event in Hong Kong? Well, I'll let the Commissioner answer the question. Commissioner, please. Thank you, Chair. Well, the construction of the Kai Tak Sports Park is on schedule. After assessing the impact, we have discussed with the contractor. We are very confident that the works will be completed by the end of 2024. And the national games will start in September or early October of 2025. So we have ample time for preparations and testing to make sure everything is going to go smoothly during the national games and that operations will be smooth. For other events that are going to take place outside of the sports park, one of them would include golfing. Well, the Chinese Golfing Association has been here, their representatives specifically, and they told the Sports Federation that the Hong Kong Golf Club should be adequate in hosting the National Games golfing event. Well, I think the schedule is quite tight because when you said the works could be completed in at the end of 2024, and the national games are going to begin in September of 2025. But you shouldn't underestimate the time needed for the testing of facilities. Also, with the operations, it would also require testing. If you only start operating the day on which the national games begin, there are going to be problems, because with that many people in the stadium, you need crowd management experience. You need to make adjustments through such experience so that operations will go smoothly when the national games events are being held. So I think you have to be prudent, and you should not underestimate the complexity of this final step. Well, Undersecretary, please. Well, thank you, Dr. Low, for your kind reminder. We are definitely attaching great importance of that. So I hope members will support our next proposal, because it is about the retention of 2 posts for the Kai Tak Sports Park. It is very important for the on-time completion of the Kai Tak Sports Park project. Any follow-up, Dr. Low? Well, next would be me, Mrs. Regina Ip, and I have quite a few questions for the supernumerary posts. They have said that there could be time-limited D6 or D3 equivalent positions. As for the Assistant Director of Municipal Services D2 post, there's no such equivalent position. So is it the case that for D6 and D3, the positions that you think you can recruit someone from the outside, but for the Assistant Director, you will recruit from inside the government? Yes, your understanding is correct. We hope to have flexibility for the D6 and D3 posts, that we may need talents from the outside, because their duties are quite complex and their positions are definitely very important. So we would hope to have the best candidates for the job. When Mr. Vincent Ching is reporting on the deliberations during the panel meeting, well, it was suggested that people who have hosted the EAG 2009 to help host the events, will you still have people from that event to help in that? Because it has been 14 years. Do you have any expectations on who the candidates are going to be? Because for the Island South office, it was actually someone retired who took the post. Well, of course, we would want to look into all sorts of candidates to have the best candidate for the job. Retired officers or ex-public officers or people who have hosted such events are definitely our target for the post. Once we have the candidate, we will report to the public as soon as possible. Also, in paragraph 6 of the paper, you said the proposed work plan is initially drawn up with reference to the experience from the East Asian Games 2009. Well, can you remind us how many events we hosted then, or how many mass participation events? Well, I'll let the Commissioner for Sports talk about that. Commissioner, please. Well, I don't remember the exact number of the events for the East Asian Games. It should be 20-odd events. But there were less participating countries, that is 9 countries. So we expect the scale to be quite different from the national, it should be quite similar to the national games. Because for the national games, we have athletes from all over the country. We are hosting 8 events. What are the 8 events? How many athletes do you expect to be here, or how many people will be there for the mass participation events? We would include event 7, people rugby, sailing, we have golfing, soccer, U18, beach volleyball, and handball. 8 events in total. So there are 30 odd units in provinces, in terms of provinces or municipalities participating in the national games. Well, for each event, there is a set number of athletes. Officially, there should be 3,000 people approximately, that is, athletes, would be here. Well, they would include their supporting teams as well. So just only these would be 3,000. How about the mass participation events? Right now, we are proposing to host 4 to 5 events. Well, the exact numbers would have to depend on more detailed information to be provided by the GESC. And it's not just the people that are just going to be here for the 1 to 2 weeks. Perhaps earlier during the testing competitions in June or July, people would already be coming here. What do mass participation events mean exactly? Like, is it the case that there is no age restriction or any form of restrictions? Well, for mass participation events, they are not participated by elite athletes. They could include members of the public. Next, Mr. Lai Tong Kwok. Thank you, Chair. Well, from what I can see in enclosure 1, it shows the organization chart. Apart from the head, deputy head, and assistant head, there are 43 posts. So they will be handling the work. For the work, they are mainly leisure services manager grade or executive officer grade. When you said the work of the coordination of national games, it would include many different areas with security. Is it the case that you're only going to hire several security guards, or will you have higher level of security? Because for the national games, perhaps there may be sports celebrities or high-level officials that may be here at the events. So it is important to maintain security. There's also immigration and hygiene. Well, but for what you said in the paper, they do not seem to be relevant to the current duties of your colleagues. Is it the case that certain duties are not reflected in the first enclosure 1? Well, Mr. Lai's observations are correct. Well, enclosure 1 is just a basic structure of the NGCO. The work of national games would involve many departments, including logistics, transport, and so on. So we are asking the relevant bureaus and departments what kind of manpower they would need to implement the arrangements. And staff members will be seconded to this office once they have determined the arrangements. 1 year before national games, we have much preparatory work, and we may have to have such officers work together at the NGCO then to work out the arrangements. Well, I believe there are 2 problems with that. One, many officers would have to be seconded to the office. So with the allocation of resources, have you obtained funding approval from the financial secretary for the overall expenditure then? because right now this proposal is only on the 3 directorate posts. We do not see other expenditure in the document. As the Undersecretary said, it would involve officers from various bureaus or departments. How are the estimates derived, and how can you make sure there are adequate funds so as to accommodate expenditure from other bureaus and departments so that they don't have to get their own funds on that?
係，多謝主席。
呢次對唔住我。
Undersecretary, excuse me. I will extend the meeting. Well, as I said, I have extended the meeting by 15 minutes. I also have questions to ask, and I believe some members who are not present might also have questions, but I will allow you to respond to this question. Thank you, Undersecretary. Thank you, Madam Chair. As I said, we have invited bureaus and departments to have an estimate on their manpower requirements. Then we will, as per the established mechanism, request sufficient manpower or resources for us to shoulder these responsibilities. After approval, if need be, in the coming budget or in the coming finance committees, we will seek approval from the Legislative Council for us to increase the relevant manpower or structures. Madam Chair, may I? Yes, please go on. Will you, having reviewed the situation, come back to the Legislative Council and request a directorate officer position be created? Well, right now, we do not anticipate any further creation of directorate officers. For directorate officers, well, mainly we have these 3 directorate officers responsible for the high-level work as stated. There are still members who are on the waiting list. But officials, please come back in the next meeting. The next meeting will be held on the 31st at 8:30 a.m. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.